The last 8 minutes of that movie are maybe the best 8 minutes in the entire history of the whole run of them, in a way, because everyone's involved. So I was delighted. He's recognizing that he actually should have his eyes on the long game here, and so I guess there's a different set of principles that he's operating by than he has before, and I think a lot of that has been the burgeoning effect of all of these other Avengers, and seeing how much they've put on the line. Anthony and Joe are about the only two folks that I could imagine, forget just still having the respect of the cast and crew when we were done, but not being either incarcerated or embalmed or in some other way permanently damaged, because just the physical and mental stripping of one's chi that it takes. These are years and years and years and years. They've essentially been on a job for 6-7 years now, and I love them, and they love the Avengers. It was all there in this universe to begin with, and I think that that's why the Marvel comics have always been so numinous to kids and grown-ups and people. There's this love for it because it speaks to the world, but it also speaks to the democratic American projected dream, which is far more complicated than that. But there's an ideal there that's always been trying to express itself, and strangely, in some ways, the best of it has been expressed in these little 2-hour segments of entertainment.
He's always been this very austere kind of guy, but had this real loyalty to institutions and to people, and I think they slowly strip that away from him. He loses his faith in government and Winter Soldier, and his faith in his friends and his family in Civil War, and I think when we see him in Infinity War, he's become this sort of ossified kind of I don't even know what the right word is, but he's just turned his back on a lot of things, and I think with this movie they let him kind of return back to that kind of like sanguine, hopeful soldier leader. The biggest worry is not only trying to make the guy entertaining, but to make sure that the series stays entertaining. And I just really credit everyone over at Marvel. I mean, they know these comics inside out. They're incredibly, fastidious, and I mean, they're fans themselves. So they've done their homework, and they know what the fans want. They know when they're coloring outside the lines, and they somehow manage to stay loyal to the source material, but also give this guy enough challenges to keep him interesting enough to have audiences want him coming back. I was affected. I mean, I knew it was coming, and I'm wiping tears away. So that's proof right there. If you know the story and it still kind of rocks you, that's proof they're doing something right. It's not hard with Downey. He's a very affable guy, and I think he really understood the weight of the responsibility with these movies, and I think he understood that if, when one person succeeds, we all succeed. So he really went out of his way to help us find our footing, not just in the Avengers films, but in your own individual franchise as well. Even when he wasn't on set, I still felt his support. Well, the good thing is it's always easier to build people back up after they've been broken down. So at the beginning of this movie, we see a lot of broken people, and that's what Marvel's great at doing. They've truly leveled us, not just literally, but morally and emotionally. They're true cinephiles. They really, really know so much about movies. Their directing style is really connected to that knowledge because they can reference other things in a way that I've not seen other directors reference, and right away you can kind of understand what they're looking to convey with the scene. And again, they're also incredibly personable guys, so they're just their attitude kind of breeds this sort of lightness on set, which makes everyone feel like it's game.
When I did Iron Man 2, I didn't know if the fans and the audience would accept my interpretation, my casting of this character. And so while I knew there were many different kind of dramatic directions that we could go and parts of the character that we could reveal or peel away or not, it was very, it was just an introduction to this character as like an idea. And it wasn't until Avengers 2, the first Avengers, that I got to work with Joss Whedon and really work on this characterization and develop the depth of this character's backstory and what we wanted to be her truth. I think Natasha is a little bit different than your kind of average hero or superhero in a sense, because she has she operates on a different kind of she has a different sort of moral compass than some of the other characters, like, say, even Cap. I think she understands that there's a balance between dark and light in the world, and that you kind of have to, I think she understands the sacrifice you have to make on either end in order to have a kind of balance. And that might not be a reality that some of the other characters are really willing to swallow, but I don't think she has to have the same mindset as say Cap in order to work alongside him. She just looks at the world in a different way, but they can have a shared goal. I really love Natasha. I think she's constantly evolving. She's, she doesn't get stuck on things. She's just continuously moving forward, and I think, she doesn't dwell on regrets or the past, even though those things may haunt her.
Thor Ragnarok, Thor probably wouldn't have fit in this film. You can afford to take bigger risks and be that wacky and reinvent the entire world to support your version of the character if it's your title film. But you've got to, if you come into an ensemble, also sort of adjust and fit into the mold and the tone of that film. And this really was sort of Thor at his best, is how Joe and Anthony described it. This was his most heroic, his most sort of vengeful, passionate, driven kind of committed version that we'd seen, and so that was fun, to again explore something completely different. What I haven't seen before, I think, is this sort of force and this sort of power by one single individual, and it's not only his sort of intellect that manages to sort of navigate his way through this and outsmart us, but it just his sheer force and strength is something that none of the Avengers or anyone in the MC universe has ever really encountered before. So, that was, I think, on paper, an exciting thing to sort of embark on, and also even just reading the script, kind of racing to the end to work out how the hell are we going to beat this guy. I think most of us have been pretty vocal about what he started, and without him, none of us would be in this position. And what he created and invented, we had to rally sort of in amongst that and behind him, and he led the way like a true leader and champion, and you know, we wouldn't be here without what he'd done. And there's always been such a great encouragement from him, such great constant feedback to what we're doing. I think it's the darkest in some ways, the sort of wackiest in other ways. It feels like there's a real sort of drama at the core of it, a sort of small indie character-driven sort of drama on one hand, and then coupled with it being the most expensive, biggest, visually stunning, smorgasbord, effects-driven film you could ever imagine.
I think that's part of like the secret sauce that Marvel has, is having, like, it's not just slinging arrows and flying with hammers and that kind of stuff. It makes fun of itself when it needs to. It's serious when it needs to be serious. It's grounded, and then it's absolutely a spectacle and ridiculous and action packed, and then that sense of humor is of making fun of itself. I think is one of the best sort of ingredients in this storytelling of this long episodic of what Marvel's created. I have such a great connection with them, and they're great communicators. It's nice to have two of them. I couldn't imagine it just being one person. Working with them on Civil Wars and then in these two Infinity War films, they have such a you never get an opportunity, in my mind, I don't think, to be able to be as free and as you can go off book and just start playing around, and nobody cares about what turns out best or what's funniest or what's most serious or what's most subtle. They really, as a leader of this whole thing, as directors, they empower all the other actors and to be leaders themselves, to contribute, and they really unite people. There's a great communion that they establish, and they have a great sense of humor. I trust in everything that they say and do.
Part of why I became an actor is because it's always changing. I don't have to do the same thing over and over again. And luckily, Banner has had this kind of crazy trajectory at this point. An actor's essential journey is really kind of like a vagabond. It's transient. You're alone. You don't see people very often. And this was totally different than that. And so we made this beautiful family together. And I'm actually really moved about it. Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about Marvel is they sort of have their hand on the pulse of the culture, and as a reflection of, and I would say even a bit of a leader of where we are, where we were, and where we're going.
These characters are archetypes, and the emotional resonance, the relationships they have with one another, and it's really the main thing that makes the movies work. It's the main thing that makes any movie work. The visuals are incredible and the action's great, and all of that would be fun to experience, but it wouldn't last or have the same impact if you didn't really care about the characters. One of the things that I really have always liked about Ant-Man and our films is that it really is about kind of parental and these relationships, family relationships. And, Scott Lang is a father, and that puts him in, I guess with Hawkeye as well, but not many of those characters are parents. And so we get to focus on that. And that was something that I always thought would kind of play through Scott Lang's character and story in both of the films. I think Thanos is a really complex, amazing antagonist, because like any good villain, when I saw Infinity War, I'm like, what he's saying, you can see the logic. That it's sure, maybe he's a psychopath, but it's like at its heart, there's something that you can sympathize with, and I think Brolin does a great job at playing kind of a powerful character. He's perfectly cast as somebody that you think like, wow, he just exudes a kind of strength and poise, and he brings that to Thanos. And it's, when you've got this many amazing heroes fighting you, you better be a pretty formidable opponent, and you need a pretty formidable actor to play somebody like that. And so Josh, I think, really, hit a home run.
We've seen Carol's transformation. We've seen her kind of grow and evolve and have ownership of these powers. And more than anything, we've just seen how incredibly strong she is. She's been called. Nick Fury has finally decided that there's an emergency. And of course, she's going to take that call. You get to see this really beautiful thing, which you kind of get a taste of with Avengers Infinity War as well, which is very powerful people meeting each other, powerful people all being in one room, powerful people that all have very specific skills working together to form a team. And Carol, because she sort of has this connection of Nick, who is obviously sort of the mastermind behind all of this, there is a sense of respect from the beginning when she walks into the room. I think there's, of course, apprehension at the same time of like, who are you? But I think very quickly they understand that this is someone that they want to be on their team, and that their hands are tied at this point. They've done the best that they can do and came up short, so they're going to have to lean on somebody new. So at the end of Avengers Infinity War, we're devastated, and we're in a state of devastation. And I think what's amazing about these films is there are stakes unlike we've ever seen before in films like this. There is no bouncing back from some of this. We're also seeing with Carol the scope of what's happened because she comes from a different place. We're seeing that this is not just something that's just on Earth. This is an interstellar type of situation, which brings a whole new level of importance to this. That this is big. So we get to kick this off with a little bit of a glimmer of hope, a sense that there's a team that's forming that's going to be able to get this done. Carol is stronger than ever, more embodied than ever. She's been learning how to do stuff for, however long that we haven't seen her between her origin story and now. And she's ready. She's matured. And the team needs her.
The first time I saw Avengers Infinity War was with everybody else at the premiere for the film. And I only knew the material that I had shot as Nebula. And so I had no idea what was going on in the rest of the film. And so I got to sort of like experience it along with everyone else, like one of the fans, which was pretty cool. And I was floored. I didn't expect to cry as much as I did. I was particularly invested, obviously, in the Gamora Thanos storyline. I thought that was just sort of epic and really, really devastating. And the whole thing, I was just floored by it. Coming out of the last film and starting in Endgame, Nebula is not in the best place emotionally. I mean, she had just started to form a connection with her sister, which is something she had wanted her whole life. And it was finally happening for her, just the beginnings of it, and then her sister was taken away from her. And that was her only real family. So she is feeling alone and completely lost and helpless. It's incredibly satisfying to be able to kind of, you know, explore and uncover parts of this character throughout the movies. I mean, you know, usually you would have that kind of arc in one movie, but with Nebula, I mean, it's just over the course of multiple movies now. And that just keeps it really interesting for me as an actor because, I mean, she's changing every time. I never feel like I'm repeating myself. It's like we're learning something new about her every single time. They're just so supportive, and whenever I speak to them about a character moment, they are so ready to dive into that because I think they cherish those character moments within all of the action. And there's so many of those in this movie, and that's because they invest the time in them and, you know, with the actors, and we worked really hard to make sure that these character moments were detailed and specific. The thing I love most about being part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is my character. I fell in love with her from moment one when I auditioned to play the role. And just this whole sibling relationship with Gamora and her relationship with Thanos, it's so complicated and it's just always been so interesting to me and the most incredible acting exercise. And so getting to kind of see that unfold and explore it over multiple movies has been the most satisfying experience.
Well, I couldn't have imagined, you know, how far this would come from 10 years ago, and really never envisioned what it would be like to have so many people from the MCU all together on one set and in one story, and how the storylines complement each other and how they affect one another. And it's really an awesome achievement, which is, you know, a testament, obviously, to Kevin and everybody who's at Marvel keeping this sort of mythology together and finding ways to create storylines that, you know, work for the comics, but at the same time, you know, kind of work in concert with what we're trying to do as a live-action film. I think in this one we really got to see a lot of dimensions of Rhodey, and clearly through his trials and tribulations and everything that he's been through, and him sort of getting back on his feet, so to speak, literally and emotionally and physically. And so, you know, I've had a nice arc in this character run, and it's been a lot of fun. That's the thing. I think that's what these movies pay off well, is the grandeur, and then there'll be very intimate scenes, and it plays between that, you know, pretty fastly, I think, and that's something that's rare.
We didn't understand the nuances of the role. I think, again, they had intention, and yes, you have the relationship with Gamora and Nebula and all that stuff, but I think it wasn't until we started experimenting that we realized that there was a character there that you could, like what I said before, that you can invest, you know, into, and that you could sympathize with. I think that's the biggest thing. It was a character that you could sympathize with. Avengers is the best, one of the best decisions I've ever made because of what I'm getting out of it on the other side, which is audience participation and total investment into what we love more than anything, which is the ability to tell a story in a way that people can identify with and are emotional in reaction to.
And your job is to focus, and yeah, it's a very disciplined process for us, and we've had incredible collaborators in Marcus McFeely for all 4 movies, and they've written more films than anyone else in the Marvel Universe. They have an encyclopedic knowledge of the characters, and you know, so it's as you progress through films like that, your job as directors gets bigger and bigger, you know. And there's the adage that you gotta fly at 40,000 feet, you know, to get perspective on the whole thing. Well, by the time you get to something like Endgame, you're flying at 70,000 feet. You really have to have an incredible team of collaborators that you're working with that allow you to focus on the big picture. I think we have a lot emotionally invested in Cap as a character. We have a lot emotionally invested in Chris as a friend and a collaborator. So I think it's a proud moment to be able to sit back and look at with perspective the journey that character's gone on, because I think while I think Tony's one of the most complicated characters in the Marvel Universe, if not the most complicated, Cap had the most interesting arc. And, Winter Soldier was not only I think a touchstone moment for the Marvel Universe, it shifted tone, it upended, it's the moment when we started disrupting the Marvel Universe, so it upended everything that you had known up until that point and shifted it and turned it all upside down. But Cap had to question his very identity and go against the country that had given him his identity. And that is a really rich theme, and I think that Cap carries with him the most profound thematics, and he does so again going into Endgame.
In our mind, part of the reason why the Avengers failed in Infinity War is because they were divided, because of the fallout of Civil War left them in a place where they weren't functioning as a team when Thanos comes for the stones. They aren't in communication with one another. So when Thanos attacks, they're divided. And so divided, in fact, that they never get together as a team throughout the entire film to oppose Thanos. But at the end of the day, we feel like all meaningful storytelling has to include stakes. And it's, in order to have emotional highs, you have to have emotional lows in drama. And so part of the reason, we knew that ourselves and audiences had so much joy out of these films for so many years now, that if we didn't start to test that and push back against that, it would essentially just start to dissipate on its own. So we needed, in order to keep the narrative vital and vibrant, we had to take big risks and we had to test it.
What's so exciting for us, and was the intention from the start many years ago when we embarked on this two-picture journey to sort of tie up the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that it would be very hard to predict where Avengers Endgame goes and how it gets there. I think all of the remaining heroes deal with the events of the end of Infinity War differently. I think most of them are not used, all of them are used to trauma of one kind or another. None of them are used to being defeated so thoroughly by a single antagonist. And I think they are trying to figure out how that happened and why that happened. It's been a journey, and it's been a journey for 10 plus years for our fans, for people that enjoy going to the movies, and the reaction to the end of Infinity War, when half of their favorite characters dissipated and turned to dust, really was indicative of how emotionally connected the world has gotten to these characters. It is triply so for those of us working day in and day out on these movies, and certainly the actors who've been portraying these characters for many years.
It's two of the biggest movies that Marvel has ever made. So to trust me with that is an amazing feeling, but to also be a part of it and take the journey with the Russo brothers and Marcus McFeely and the rest of their crew for the year and a half that we were in Atlanta shooting the two movies, and then just seeing it at the end, watching it with everybody at the premiere, where at first, actually for some people, it was the first time that they've ever seen it. It was a pretty overwhelming feeling, but it was amazing altogether. This is the first time that Marvel has ever made a movie where our villain actually wins at the end. Our heroes were brutally defeated by Thanos. So that was the first, and it was very exciting to actually, take that leap and do something different. So I think, and then to have audience actually embrace that at the end, and when they watched the movie and they were, and it is bittersweet. It was overwhelming in the sense that this is the first time our heroes are defeated this way, and some of our characters didn't make it at the end. But in a good way, it was a change in that they were actually pretty surprised that we actually took that challenge. And I think the outcome, was. I love that people embrace that. They love these characters and they know these characters inside out. And they're literally, you could not have asked for better directors to be making these two movies, because they're so passionate about what they do and they love this world and like they love the MCU, and all they want to do is just build upon that and create more. It is the biggest movie that Marvel has ever made. I mean, the scope of this movie is unheard of. And, when we say, or when Tony utters the words, it's been leading to this, it's all been leading to this, it is true. Avengers 4, this movie, Strange says it so perfectly at the end of Infinity War. We're now in the Endgame. This is it. This is the big epic showdown of all showdowns.
Well, we were unsure what the response was going to be. How often does the villain win, and win in such a resounding way that you lose approximately half of your superheroes and half of the living creatures in the universe? So we weren't quite sure. We thought they might revolt on us, but I think some of them, it was a mixed bag, I would think, too. Some people hated it but loved it at the same time. Some people loved it because they know there's another Avengers movie coming out, and to see how this all wraps up. So I think it was quite a mixed bag, but I think that through the common denominator through it all is that people were really moved by it, and Marvel has gone in a completely another direction and has done something different. The villain wins, the heroes lose, and now what happens? The Russos are so adept at handling complicated storylines, dealing with multiple issues. They're great with comedy. That's where they started. That's where their chops are. They've become great at action. They're the premier action directors. So, and they're great with emotion. If you look at Civil War, for instance, how emotional is that film? So they were the perfect combination. And we needed two people that were going to be able to shoot for a year straight. That is a remarkable amount of shooting. It would be relentless because of you're constantly prepping, shooting, editing as you go, and there was no other choice. And when we approached them with it, they said they were wide-eyed and smiling. He said, "Yes, we're up for this task."